The autumn leaves crunched beneath Claire's boots as she walked toward her family's farmhouse. The air was crisp, tinged with the smell of wood smoke, but the warmth of the season did little to calm the storm brewing in her chest. She had received a call that morning, one she never expected. "Claire," her mother's voice trembled on the other end of the line. "He's coming home." She didn't have to ask who. There was only one person her mother could mean: James, her brother. The brother who had left without a word 10 years ago, shattering their family. As Claire reached the porch, memories of their childhood flooded her mind. She could still hear the laughter they used to share, see the secret handshakes they invented. But that was before the arguments, before James's sudden departure. The door creaked open, and there he was. James stood in the doorway, older, but unmistakably him. His hair was shorter, streaked with gray at the temples, and his eyes carried a heaviness she didn't recognize. "Hey, Claire," he said softly, his voice breaking the silence. But before she could respond, her eyes landed on the small suitcase, at his feet, and the unusual tension in his stance. Something wasn't right. Claire and James had been inseparable as children, the kind of siblings who finished each other's sentences and shared whispered secrets under blanket forts. James was the adventurous one, always dreaming big, while Claire was the cautious, grounding force. Their bond was the envy of everyone who knew them, but as they grew older, the cracks began to show. James struggled to find his place in the world. While Claire pursued her career as a teacher, James bounced between jobs, unable to commit to anything. Their parents' expectations weighed heavily on him, and the tension at home grew unbearable. One night, after a particularly heated argument with their father, James left. He didn't leave a note or a forwarding address. For 10 years he was a ghost, a name mentioned in hushed tones, a shadow that lingered in every family photo. The years without James were hard on the family. Their father grew bitter, their mother withdrew, and Claire was left to pick up the pieces. She resented him for abandoning them, but also missed him fiercely. Occasionally rumors would surface: a friend who claimed to have seen him in another city, a postcard with no return address, but they led nowhere. Claire convinced herself he was gone for good, until today. James's sudden return after a decade stirred emotions Claire didn't know she still had. Relief, anger, hope. They all swirled together as she faced the brother she barely recognized. But something about his demeanor set her on edge. The family gathered in the living room, the air thick with unspoken words. James sat on the couch, his suitcase at his feet, while their mother fussed nervously with her hands. "Where have you been, James?" their father finally asked, his voice gruff, but carrying an undercurrent of vulnerability. James hesitated, his eyes darting to Claire, before settling on their father. "I've been figuring things out," he said vaguely. "That's not an answer," Claire interjected, her frustration bubbling over. "You left us. For 10 years we didn't know if you were alive or dead. And now you just show up?" "I'm sorry," James said quietly, his gaze dropping to the floor. "I know I hurt you all. I had my reasons, but I can't change the past." "What reasons?" Claire demanded. James rubbed his temples, clearly struggling to find the right words. "I needed to get away, to start over. Things here felt suffocating. But I didn't realize how much I'd hurt you until it was too late." The tension in the room was palpable. Their father's jaw tightened. Their mother wiped a tear from her cheek, and Claire crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing. Just as the silence became unbearable, James reached for his suitcase. He unzipped it and pulled out a small box. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice trembling. "But first, I want you to meet someone." Claire's breath caught in her throat. Meet someone? Who could he mean? James opened the box, revealing a stack of letters and a photograph of a young boy with James's unmistakable green eyes. "This is Ben," James said, his voice breaking. "He's my son." The room fell into stunned silence. Claire's mind raced as she processed James's words. A son? How was that possible? Why hadn't he told them? "You have a child," James nodded, his hands shaking as he held the photograph. He's 8 years old. His mother and we met a few years after I left. We had a complicated relationship, and when she passed away last year, I became his sole guardian. Claire's anger began to dissolve, replaced by a wave of unexpected sympathy. She glanced at the photograph again, her heart softening as she saw the resemblance between James and the little boy. "Why didn't you tell us sooner?" their father asked, his tone softer now. "I didn't know how," James admitted. "I felt like I'd burned every bridge with you, and when I became a father I was terrified I'd mess it up just like I thought I messed everything else up. But Ben, he's my whole world, and he deserves to know his family." Claire's eyes filled with tears as she imagined the struggles James must have faced raising a child on his own while carrying the weight of his past mistakes. "Where is he now?" Claire asked. "He's outside," James said, a small smile breaking through his anxiety. "I wanted to make sure it was okay before bringing him in." Their mother's face lit up with a mixture of excitement and nerves. "Go get him, James," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. James stepped outside, and moments later he returned holding the hand of a small boy with curly hair and wide green eyes. "Hi," the boy said shyly, clutching a toy truck. "Ben, this is your grandma, grandpa, and your Aunt Claire," James said gently. Claire crouched down, her heart swelling as she met Ben's gaze. "Hi, Ben. It's so nice to meet you." Ben smiled, his initial hesitation melting away. The family gathered around him, their long-lost bond slowly beginning to mend. As the evening wore on, the family began to reconnect in ways Claire hadn't thought possible. Laughter filled the room as Ben shared stories about his favorite games and his dreams of becoming an astronaut. James watched from the corner of the room, his heart full as he saw his son embraced by the family he had once thought he'd lost, forever. At one point, Claire pulled James aside. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I was so angry at you for leaving, but I didn't understand how much you were struggling. Seeing you now, seeing Ben, I'm proud of you, James." Tears welled in James's eyes. "Thank you, Claire. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'll do everything I can to make it up to you." "You already have," she said, squeezing his hand. The following weeks were a time of healing and growth for the family. James and Ben moved into the farmhouse, filling it with the sound of laughter and the pitter-patter of little feet. James found a job nearby, and Claire took every opportunity to spend time with her nephew, teaching him how to bake cookies and read bedtime stories. Their parents, once weighed down by regret and grief, seemed to come alive again, doting on their grandson. One evening, as the family sat around the dinner table, James raised his glass. "To second chances," he said, his voice steady and full of gratitude. "To family," Claire added, smiling at her brother. And for the first time in years, the farmhouse felt like home again. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Echo Tales for more heartwarming stories of resilience, forgiveness, and the power of family. Let us know in the comments what this